So Glenn.
So Sharon.
How are you today?
That's fine. How are you?
Here we are again.
Yes, ma'am.
I like being up here. I'm getting to really enjoy these talks.
Turn into a little recording studio.
I like it. It's really fun. So today we're going to be talking about the kind of problems we can get into when we're first starting, mistakes we might make.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very excited about that because I know that the first interface that you have with a potential client really begins to set the tone. And so I'm very interested in hearing, your thoughts about that.
I think we've been talking about the importance of your initial communications and your story and your marketing message, because people actually start to develop a relationship with you before they have a relationship with you.
Right.
They have a relationship with you in their head. And when they listen to the teleseminars, they read your Irresistible newsletter, they're continuing to bond to you. But there's a particular moment in the marketing process that's very important, and that's when the client decides to pick up the phone and call you.
Uh-huh.
And most people, I think, don't really have an understanding of everything that the client goes through at that time. They're at once simultaneously hopeful and excited that they motivated themselves to make the call, and terrified that maybe they'll reveal something to you that they don't want to reveal to you, and
or at least not yet.
And wondering if you can actually help them accomplish their goals, if you can be the person who can help them accomplish the goals that nobody else has helped them accomplish before.
Right.
They're protecting themselves against that disappointment before they even, hear your voice on the phone. And there's a level of depression and anxiety. And I'm not talking about DSM-4 depression and anxiety. I'm talking, by the way, I think it's DSM-5 now. I'm not talking about a diagnosable mental disorder, depression and anxiety. I'm talking about the kind of existential angst that people walk around with every day from not being listened to. Because how many people actually have the experience of being focused on and listened to in an empathic and goal-oriented way? How many people actually have that experience ever?
It's very interesting what you say, and it's reminding me of an interview I did last week with a doctor. I was doing some work for the New England Journal of Medicine, and I was interviewing a whole bunch of doctors in New York and Chicago to get their impressions of, different kinds of information sources. And a woman came in, and she was late. She came late. She's a doctor in Chicago, and she was very apologetic about being late. And for some reason, I think she was nervous about the interview. She was very creative, and I took her through a whole bunch of guided imagery exercises and creativity exercises that I did with everyone else. She happened to have been an extraordinarily creative person. And she said to me about halfway through the interview, nobody ever listens to me. They come in, they ask me for antibiotics. They come in, they want a diagnosis, and they just want a quick solution. But nobody ever asks me what I think or what I feel. She said, this has been such a mind-opening experience. I can hardly believe it. I feel like I've been changed by having been here and gone through this interview. And it makes me want to do some different things in my life. And I've been thinking about changing my career and moving from practicing to teaching. And, this has been very, very helpful. And I should be paying you instead of you paying me for this time. And
yeah.
I was so struck by it, just what you're saying, that these people need to be listened to.
They're living lives of quiet desperation, to quote a famous author. And I think that at the moment that they're willing to contact us, we have to do everything that we can to show the utmost respect and step up to the plate. Because they certainly are. They certainly are. Additionally, there's less of a stigma involved in getting a coach than there is in getting a therapist, but people are still concerned about it.
They're anxious about getting help. It's saying that I need help.
Right.
And
right.
So maybe I'm not, enough.
Right. Right. And so there's a number of things that you can do in the way that you construct your answering machine message and the way that you manage your voicemail, the way that you actually respond and listen to and manage your voicemail, that can immediately bond people to you. And
really?
Yeah. Yeah. So why don't I talk about that? Is that okay?
I would love to hear it.
Okay. So we've been talking about some of the psychological concerns the psychological existential concerns that people might have before they call a coach. But there's also some practical concerns like, how long is it going to take this person to call me back? And is this a confidential machine? Is anybody else going to hear the message? And how long can I speak for? Because people will become more bonded to you if they can speak to you longer. Does this person really want to hear from me? All those things are going through their minds. So when you construct your message, you want to speak long enough and lovingly enough so that people can connect to your voice and look forward to that next contact they're going to get from you.
Right.
Now, this is particularly helpful advice for people who might be advertising in a competitive market. In the stepladder market, like the Yellow Pages, if you were advertising or counseling in the Yellow Pages or something like that, then if your machine is that much different than everybody else's, then this can really bond people to you. But in the stepladder marketing process, people generally aren't going to be calling a bunch of different life coaches. By the time they're ready to call you, they will have already been bonded to you and pre-qualified through your touch points and your newsletters and all the work that you did to get them here. But it's still a very important time to bond with them. So you want to speak long enough and lovingly enough so that people can connect to you and look forward to hearing from you. You want to reinforce your phone number because people don't always leave a message the first time they call. And the people that are starting to call you, it starts to train them to know your phone number by heart. So it bonds your repeat clients to you even more.
By repeating your phone number?
By repeating your phone number, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Who would have thought? A little thing like that. It makes sense.
Well, I mean, the way that I figured this out was when I started my practice, you joked with me that you thought I was just lonely, but I actually got on the phone and I called. This is a psychological practice that I started originally before I did the life coaching. I called every psychologist in the Nassau County Yellow Pages just to listen to their answering machine. And, took notes and thought about the differences. And
you kind of put it through your own skin to see how it made you feel as a potential client?
Yeah. Why don't I read you a sample message that worked really well for me in my practice?
And then we could talk about the parts and how you put them together?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear it.
And by the way, I'm using an old phone number because I unfortunately can't take coaching clients anymore. This phone number actually won't work, but this is just an example. This is Glenn Livingston at 516-367-8619. If you've heard this message before, please press 1 to interrupt at any time and leave your message. I'm sorry I'm not available to take your call right now, but I do intend to return it quite shortly, most likely within 4 hours, and definitely by the end of the day. It's helpful if you speak slowly and clearly when you leave your message. And please be sure to include your name, phone number, and a few good times to reach you. No one will hear this message but myself, so you can speak freely. The machine will record for up to 2 minutes. But please feel free to call back if you need to speak longer. Again, I intend to return your call quite shortly, most likely within 4 hours and definitely by the end of the day. I'm looking forward to speaking with you.
That's terrific. And can you say point by point what you wanted to accomplish with each part of it?
Yeah. Well, this is Glenn Livingston at 516-367-8619. I want them to realize that they've called the right machine.
So you're giving them a sense of success immediately, that they made the call and they got to the right person.
Yeah. And I want to start to drill my phone number into their head.
Okay.
Because you get a lot of hang-ups initially. People call when they're scared.
Right.
I always remember this one girl that actually came to the office door, sat outside on the bench, and decided not to come in. And I thought to myself, if that's the person that I could kind of see, how many other people are calling the phone, listening to the message, and walking away?
Right.
So I want them to get the phone number into their head. And the second part says, if you've heard this message before, please press 1 to interrupt and leave your message at any time. That's
terrific, because then you're being related to your ongoing patients.
Yeah. And even some new clients, by the way, this is a generic message that would work for either a psychotherapy or a life coaching practice. Even some new clients will be impatient to leave a message, so you want to make it possible for them to do that.
Right.
And most voicemail systems will allow you to press 1. By the way, if you don't have a personal voicemail, there's a really cool service for like $5 a month at evoice.com. And they'll allow you to record a message, and they'll actually send the message to you via email on your computer when it comes in, and they'll You can call in like a regular answering machine. And they'll send you a text message or somebody calls it.
So you need a microphone for your computer?
No.
By phone?
eVoice.com is a phone service. I hope they make it. I've been using them. I really like them. They're a phone service. Think of them off the computer to start with.
Okay.
And you just sign up for a voicemail, and you can manage it over the phone the way that you normally would. So you call up on the phone, and you record your message, and retrieve your messages when you want to call in.
So you can do it on the phone or on your computer to get your messages?
Well, then they add it, yeah. So it's a regular voicemail service with $5 a month, and if you don't want to bother with the computer aspects of it, then you don't have to. But the nice thing that they'll also do for you is you can check an option, and every time somebody leaves a voicemail, they'll email you a sound file with that voicemail.
That's so cool.
And you download a little bit of software from them, that small piece of software that plays their proprietary sound format. I suppose it's compressed in a certain way. I don't know why they don't use standard compression, but they will notify you whenever you have a message, and they will also, if you've got a cell phone, they will send you a text message to let you know when you have a new one.
That's very interesting.
So, yeah, it's a voicemail service. If you are struggling because you're trying to share a phone or something like that, then you don't have to do that. You can just go for $5 a month to eVoice.com, and if for some reason this company doesn't make it because they're kind of new,
somebody else will.
You just go to the internet and type in voicemail services, and you'll find one very inexpensively.
That's terrific. I know that I've been wanting to do that myself, because sometimes I don't want to pick up the phone. I want to hear what the message is and have a choice about when and how to call back, think through.
Mm-hmm.
And would you agree with this, that virtually don't pick up the phone, wait for a message to be left, and then have the choice of calling back when it comes to...
As a life coach?
Yes.
Absolutely, yes.
Could you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I think that most everything you do as a life coach has to do with positioning yourself as someone who does what nobody else does in that person's life. And most people in that person's life, when they present them with a problem, or they talk to them about a concern, or they verbalize an excitement to them, most people aren't carefully considering what the person's saying in the context of clients' goals and frustrations, and most people are just responding spontaneously.
From their own self.
From their own self. And if a client is calling you, particularly if they're calling you between sessions, you need to have, even if you're going to call them right back, that extra 10 seconds that you have to listen to their message and creatively respond in your own mind before you respond to them can be the difference between coming up with a brilliant response that moves them forward in their life and saying something impulsively that everybody else is responding to them when they present that need that's holding them back. So I would agree that it's virtually never a good idea to pick up the phone. If you do pick up the phone and you get a client on the phone, at that moment that client has to become the most important thing. So I think that if you decide to pick up your coaching line and you're in the middle of something, that you need to drop what you're in the middle of and talk to them for 5 minutes or so
or listen to them for 5 minutes.
Yeah,
right.
Listen to them for 5 minutes or so and help them with whatever they wanted to call you about. But the downside of that is that you're then training them that you're available to them for urgent needs. You're almost positioning yourself like an emergency room doctor, and they won't develop the enhanced frustration tolerance, which will empower them to integrate the work that you've done together. So part of what you're always doing as a life coach is
trying to help them grow and deal with their life in a more constructive manner rather than urgent care.
Right. You're trying to foster independence.
That makes sense.
Okay.
The reason that I say it, and I know that you talk about this a lot, I've been thinking about, taking on coaching people, and I was just starting to think about it, and I hadn't decided exactly who I wanted yet. And one of the women in the office put through a call, caught me off guard, and this woman needed couple counseling. I really wasn't prepared. She started talking to me, and I sounded like a total idiot. Relationships are hard, aren't they? I felt so embarrassed. Of course, she never called me back. I was totally thrown off and did not come from my strength at all. And it was a very big lesson that it's important to have a grounded place for them to leave a message, for me to think about what I want to say to them, where I can put everything else out of my mind, call the person back and have them talk and see if it's possible to set up an appointment or whatever. But that was a really, really big lesson, because sometimes I can come across very professionally. If I'm caught off guard like anybody else, I can sound like an idiot.
Yeah, I think the other thing that you said there that's really important, I love that you told that story, is that when you do call them back, anytime that you're working with a client, it's important to ground yourself first. Which means if you have to go to the bathroom, you go to the bathroom. If
right.
you get yourself a cup of tea, or whatever you need to do to settle yourself down, whatever needs taken care of, so that
stand up and breathe.
So that it's possible to come outside of yourself and focus entirely on that person.
Right.
And if you just pick up the phone, it's almost never possible.
Well, particularly in the beginning, it is so exciting when somebody calls you that, oh my God, maybe I have a client, and it's really hard to avoid getting involved with your own excitement about...
I remember that.
Oh my God, it's so exciting that somebody called and they want to use you for whatever. And particularly if it seems like someone that might be important.
But you'll see they're much more likely to come back if you do this.
Absolutely, and I've seen that in my business practice as well, that if I'm too excited and I come across too anxious to have them as my client, I have a 50-50 chance, because I'm good at what I do, but I don't have a 50-50 chance. Whereas if I'm so confident in myself and I know I can do this, they come after me.
Well, and there's that whole thing also that we pursue that which retreats from us.
Right.
Right. So we were in the middle of talking about the answering machine message.
Okay.
And you had a lot of wonderful side points.
Thank you.
And we were talking about the purpose of letting them press 1 to interrupt and leave a message at any time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry I'm not available to take your call right now. It might sound trite or cliche or simple, but this might be the first time they ever ask for help.
Right. You want to demonstrate compassion.
Yeah. They're really going to be disappointed that an answering machine is picking up instead of you picking up. But I do intend to return your call quite shortly, most likely within 4 hours and definitely by the end of the day. It says, yeah, I want to talk to you. I really do. And I'm going to get back to you as soon as I can. It sets a reasonable framework so that people aren't wondering whether they're going to be waiting forever.
Right.
It's entirely possible to conform to that framework because most people understand it, I find, to mean before the end of the business day. If they happen to call you on the weekend, usually they'll give you a little slack if you don't call them for 24 hours or something like that. Okay. It's helpful if you speak slowly and clearly when you leave your message. And please be sure to include your name, phone number, and a few good times to reach you. People are anxious when they call. They forget. Before I had these instructions in the message, I actually lost a lot of opportunities because I couldn't make out the phone number. And I didn't know what the people were saying. This also reinforces that I want to hear every word that you're saying. So it sets up the relationship that I'm someone who's really going to be paying attention.
Right.
No one will hear this message but myself, so you may speak freely. What if the person is calling for help with an affair? What if the person is calling, because they want to stop gambling? What if the person is... just embarrassed. What if they're just embarrassed? What if they're struggling with their self-confidence and they aren't able to get a date? Reassuring people that it's confidential.
I like the way you said it too, like rather than saying confidentiality, you said feel free to speak freely. I like that. Right,
because on the other side of the spectrum, there are people who never would have thought that this message could get anywhere besides to you.
Right. You want to raise
the word confidential kind of sounds like a legal word, and yeah. So I'm trying to set an informal parameter of the relationship here, and people will often tell you things on the machine when you encourage them like this that will let you prepare for that first meeting.
Yeah.
So if you can really get people to speak slowly and clearly, and you can get them to pour out their heart and soul a little bit on the machine, and by the way, with the step-ladder system, this is even more likely. Then you've got those, let's say you listen to the message and it works out that you've got a few hours to wait before you can call them back. Then your creative unconscious can work on questions that you might want to ask them and what tone of voice you might have and whether you want to do more listening than talking or talking than listening, and you can draw upon all your experience and you have that time to prepare. And that really increases the probability of success. The machine will record for up to 2 minutes, but please feel free to call back if you need to speak longer. there are people who, if you have one of those machines that will let them record for a half an hour and fill up the whole tape, there are people that will do that. So I do set my machine for 2 minutes. But by the same token, if they've got more than 2 minutes of things to say and they're willing to make an active effort to call back and do it, then I want to hear what they have to say.
So you're setting limits, but also letting them know they can call back.
Absolutely.
And what the parameters are. I think
Absolutely.
that's very cool.
Yeah. Generally, people won't call back more than 2 times. Most people don't call back. Most people stop after the 2 minutes. I had one lady who called 18 times, and eventually I had to talk to her about it.
My goodness, that's amazing.
Then at the end, I just reiterate that I'm going to be calling them back shortly, most likely within 4 hours and definitely by the end of the day. And that I'm looking forward to speaking to them. And that's just to drive home the main point. In a long talk, people remember what you say first and last most, and what you say in the middle less. So I put the most important points first and last and reiterate them like that.
That makes sense. So the most important points are?
Well, the most important point is to put yourself in an empathic and loving state before you record your message. And even if it takes you, 3 or 4 hours to record the right message, and you do it over and over again, and you're saying, oh, I did this wrong, I did that wrong, I did this wrong, I did that wrong, it's okay. It'll pay off. This is the place that it's really working.
I remember it took you a long time to do that message.
Remember the day standing downstairs?
I remember.
Yeah.
And deciding whether you say hi or hello or, how you sounded with the different words and what you thought sounded better.
Oh, and I actually would change it around to keep track.
Right.
Yeah. I read it with confidence now, but that's just because it took me a lot of time to put it together. If you can come across as empathic and compassionate and you want to find some other way of encouraging people to leave you a detailed message and you want to manage your practice other than the way that I've described here, and different number of hours before you get back to them or whatever is manageable for you, and you want to put other things in the message, that's okay. The most important thing is that you're empathic and loving and that no one else is going to hear it, and they know you're going to get back to them and they know you really want to hear from them.
And you sound sincere.
And that you sound sincere. So settle yourself about it first and make sure that you authentically want to do all this. And that ties into the kind of practice that you want to have also. So
if you just had a terrible fight with somebody, you might not want to use that time to create a message.
Yeah.
Good.
I wanted to say one other thing while we were talking about boundaries and when you call people and when you don't. And it has to do with vacations. I've got a kind of controversial view about vacations. I guess the way that I want to introduce it is to ask, does your dog ever need a vacation? Could you imagine in the wild a wolf going on vacation? Could you imagine a gorilla going on vacation in the wild? If you look at animals in the wild, you'll see what they do for play when they're pups or when they're kittens, and what they do for play actually becomes their work later in life. And there's a smooth and natural transition between play and work. When a dog is shaking something in its mouth, you give it a towel and it goes back and forth and it shakes it in its mouth, and we think that's so cute. What they're really doing is practicing the kill. They're really doing, what they need to do to eat later in their life. When a cat is playing with a ball or, dunking its hand in water or under the faucet or something, it's practicing fishing.
I think they have claws.
The point is that we're the only species that has this artificial dichotomy between work and play. And I think that the reason for that is that there's a lot of conflicts in the way that society has developed and the type of work that people are put into. There's a Buddhist concept of right-lifing, and I think when people are right-lifing, when they've really found the career for them, the thing that they would pay to do if people weren't paying them, then there's no such talk about vacation. You might want to do something a little different for a week. You might want to travel. You might want to, go visit your relatives or something like that. But there's not really this burning need for a vacation. So
to get away from what you're doing.
And so I would like people to work more on setting up their practice so that they enjoy and look forward to it every day. Which means that they don't take patients or clients that make them miserable, which means that they work hard on their marketing so they have the kind of people coming in the door that allows them to specialize in what they want to specialize in. And the corollary from the client's perspective, when you say, I'm going to be on vacation in August, you can't get a hold of me then. What are you really saying to them? Saying, I have to get away from you.
Right.
I have to get away from you. I would never tell a client that.
What would you do instead?
If I was going to be traveling, first of all, I tend to like to take more long weekend, 4 or 5 day weekends, than take a month or 6 weeks off, because when I would take long periods of time off, I would find it was more disruptive to the practice, and you can do it, but people aren't as cooperative when you get back, and they're not as motivated. And
they're getting even with you.
They get even with you, yeah. So if I wanted to take a month off, first of all, I would tell people 3 or 4 months in advance that I plan to be traveling in August, and I would resume my regular appointments in September. And that gives them time to talk about it and see what it means to them. And I, in my coaching practice, would work with people to set up goals for them during the month of August. Mm-hmm. That might have them write me during that time, and they know they can always get a hold of me.
Because all through your vacation, you'd be checking your messages.
Yes. Yeah, I do.
I think that's really a good idea. I do that with my business clients. On vacation, I don't want to give up chances of a large project. I think that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And again, I think, what you said, like, if you're doing something you really enjoy doing, then it's less likely that you're going to want to have concrete, long time away from it. Mm-hmm. And as a matter of fact, it feels like a loss not to be doing it.
The other thing is that I don't want to come across like a school teacher. You can do whatever you want to.
Of course.
If you're not getting the results that you want to in your practice, this is an area to look at, to consider changing. It's one person's discovery of what works exceptionally well to motivate people. So
we're talking about setting boundaries and stuff, and I know you have feelings about, client coming late, client coming early, you being late, you being early. Can you talk about that, those kind of boundaries?
Yeah. Well, I think that clients will always call late and they'll always call early, and it depends upon their structure. And I think that we always need to accept them for where they are and who they are. But I think for the beginning life coach, the mistake that people frequently make is not understanding the difference between the life coach being a minute late or a minute early.
Say more about that.
Well, it's kind of simple, but the difference is who waits for who. In that 30 seconds, somebody's entire mood and attitude can change.
They have to wait?
Yeah. Have you ever been in a situation where your mood changed all of a sudden?
Many times.
Yeah. And particularly in an interpersonal situation, if your client has to wait for you, and, there will be times that they do, but particularly in the beginning, if they have to wait for you, they flooded with anxiety. They're flooded with a lot of negative feelings, and I strongly recommend that people work it up to set themselves up so they can answer the phone a minute early if they need to.
That makes total sense. I know, in a doctor's office, it makes me out of my mind, and I've interviewed so many patients, they go totally crazy having to wait for the doctor to take them. Mm-hmm. They just feel so devalued. So it makes total sense to me.
Right. And when you're late with your client, you're teaching them that it's okay for them to do that with you.
Mm-hmm. Well, they'll get even with you for it by being late, too.
Mm-hmm. Of course, it's going to happen, but the more you can be there before them, the more success you're going to have.
So, do you have some tips about, how to make sure that happens?
Yes, sure. Don't schedule clients right on top of each other.
So what do you mean by that?
I think that you need a half an hour between clients.
Half an hour? Wow.
I do. I think you need a half an hour between clients. 15 minutes minimum, but because you probably want to take some notes, and you probably need to get a glass of water, you might need to return a phone call, you might need to breathe, have a moment for yourself, then you consider the appointment to be actually 5 minutes before it happens. So consider your time to be there to be 5 minutes before it happens. And, if clients are late, one of the things I like to do is use that time to journal a little bit about them. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I'll review the notes that I have written about them. I'll review their goals and aspirations, and I'll review what's worked before with them. If I've given them any assignments, I'll kind of reorient myself to that. So you can use the time productively for the client, even if the client can't do that for you. And clients will typically say that they don't believe me if I tell them that's what I do. And I'll tell them, well, I'm here, because I charge for my time. So I feel that I owe it to them to be working on their goals. Working on their goals when they're not able to do that. And I think that when I first started my practice, I had the imagination I was going to be able to spend, for every hour that I worked with clients, I was going to be able to spend an hour writing about them and figuring. Yeah. Well, I come from a long family of psychotherapists, and my father always told me that when he first started his practice, that's what he did. he would have an hour of supervision or an hour of writing about his patients. But my father wasn't a marketer, and he didn't have the ability to get, 65 patients in the door as quickly as I did.
Right.
So he had 5 or 10 patients, so that meant he would be spending 5 or 10 hours working with people and then 5 or 10 hours in supervision or writing about them, and it really worked for him. And that's not a bad way to start. It's not a bad way to, if you go back in the marketing module, you remember that you can put things on hold. Mm-hmm. You can work the marketing system like a faucet. So if you do get overwhelmed by too many calls, that you can slow that down. Another way to do that, by the way, and this should have been talked about when we talked about the answering machine, was when you want new clients, have your machine answer after 1 ring. When you don't want them, have it answer after 5 or 6 rings. And people get frustrated and they won't call. And you only get calls from your current clients when you have 5 or 6 rings. So,
talking about timing, can I ask you one other question?
Sure.
What's the ideal time length of a session? A life coaching session?
Oh, it's kind of arbitrary. It depends upon your abilities and your preferences and your schedule and your client's schedule. I work with 45-minute sessions, and people would always ask me on the phone, how long are your sessions? And that was really a value question. That was really a...
How much am I getting for how much?
Yeah. Are you sitting and watching the clock while we're working together, and you're going to cut me off right away as soon as 45 minutes are over? And how much do you really want to work with me?
Got it.
And so I'll say, well, my sessions are 45 minutes. I don't have an alarm clock that goes off after 45 minutes. So if you happen to be talking about something one time, then I don't like to stop people. That is usually very satisfying to them. Sometimes you'll want to do longer sessions. There are some people, particularly if they're in crisis, that they feel more settled about a longer session. More frequently than not, I would find, because of the way that I work, more frequently than not, I would find that people would call and ask for a long session, and then they get through the first half an hour and they would be done. They wouldn't really...
Because they didn't realize, even though it was a big issue, that talking about the big issue didn't necessarily take more time.
Right. Or that, I've seen that big issue 22 times and it was going to be so easy for me to settle them down.
Right.
There are some other considerations about length of time. One has to do with the finances. So if you are wanting to charge a lot, then it might be that your standard session is $200 or something like that. And it could be possible that people can't afford that on a regular basis. They might want to do a half a session with you, and that's perfectly okay. And as you experiment with different lengths, you will become proficient with those lengths. You'll get the rhythm of each of those times. Sometimes people would call between a session for an additional appointment, and so I would charge them for a half a session. And I would find that in those half sessions, it worked better if I was much more active and asked them some very specific questions about what they were struggling with and why they were calling, what they wanted to accomplish, and that I would lend them my strength at those times. In the regular sessions, I would usually be trying to facilitate people's...
talk.
Yeah, facilitate them to find their own answers is kind of the cliche way to say it. Facilitate them to think new thoughts and talk out loud, because that's really where the deepest growth will come from. But in between sessions or a shorter session, it's very often more conducive to zero in the problem and then lend them your strength in problem solving what they wanted to problem solve or the reason that they wanted to call.
That's great. So, note-taking.
Right, so mistake number 3 is note-taking problems.
What do you mean by that?
I think the biggest problem is people that don't take notes. I think that's up to you whether or not you want to take notes in the session or not. Some people like to make notes so they can go back to it while they're talking to people on the phone. The phone is particularly conducive for note-taking because people are watching you while you're taking notes. At the moment, coaching is not regulated or certified. Legally regulated. However, in the event that you should be sued, your progress notes would be the only record of the treatment. And you're in a much better position, talk to your attorney if you really want to know, but you're in a much better position if you've documented what your client wanted to accomplish, what they were struggling with, what plan you made with them, any action steps you took with them, and 2 or 3 sentences about what was discussed every time that they call you.
So that's a legal kind of issue. Even though it's only life coaching, you feel that you need notes?
It's legal, but it's also developmental.
I want to hear about the developmental part, but in terms of if I want to be a life coach, what are my responsibilities?
What are your legal responsibilities?
Yeah.
I'm going to defer most of the conversation for the business logistics module. At minimum, you need to write 3 sentences about every session to write the date that they called.
Mm-hmm.
You probably want to keep track of payment.
Mm-hmm.
And you should have a disclaimer signed and faxed to you that the client knows that they're not a psychotherapy patient. I will include a sample disclaimer in the package, and there's also a book which was written specifically for psychotherapists becoming life coaches called Therapists as Life Coach. And in that they've got a pretty good disclaimer.
Who's the author?
Patrick Williams and Deborah. I should know Deborah's last name because she's a very good friend of a friend, but I don't. Patrick Williams, Therapist as Life Coach, and you'll be able to find it.
Great. So let's go back to, so I'm clear now that there are some legal ramifications, but I know that you're a real believer in note-taking as part of process.
I'm a believer in, at minimum, taking notes, and if for nothing else, you can chart what was talked about and whether the client came on time the next time. And you'll start to see patterns. And it will help you to understand what's going on for them, and it's something that's worth glancing over from time to time. And it's very easy to do. It takes, more than 2 or 3 minutes to write a couple of sentences. So
if I know you, you probably do it after the session.
I would do it right after the session, I do, because I want to cleanse my palate. And
if you know me...
You would probably wait for the weekend.
No, actually, see, maybe you don't. When I'm interviewing, I take copious notes throughout it.
Oh, you do?
Always.
Okay.
Even if I'm doing a group, if I'm doing a one-on-one, I'm always taking notes because I have this belief that, like through my hand to my brain, that I process when I write. Sometimes I can't even read what I wrote. I write like the wind. But I find that if I write it while the person's talking, and I prep them to let them know I'm taking notes because it's just the way I work, and it helps me to help them, I find that I remember almost every single thing they say because I wrote it. So I will look back at it, I will keep a book, but I also find that it helps me to process what they're talking about and figure out what to say. It takes me to the next step.
That's cool.
People do it very differently. There are some people who would never write in the presence of a client. Never. And I'm just the opposite. I'm always writing. And then there's you who writes right after, and some people who might not write till the weekend.
Or till the end of the day, something like that. Yeah. I think it's good to get in the habit of doing it because even retrospectively, if what happens in life coaching is anything like what happened to the psychotherapy field, psychology in particular.
So with regard to notes, is there anything else we need to know?
Yeah, the other thing you need to know is that you can have 2 sets of notes. One, which is more of the formal progress notes, that in the event that you were called to the carpet and had to share it with your client, that you could, or God forbid you wind up in a legal suit, that you could use that. And another that's kind of in your personal diary. No court has the right to see your personal diary as far as I understand.
Oh, that's cool.
In your personal diary, you can write all of your personal thoughts and feelings and reactions, and it's a good place to get out the subjective feelings and thoughts that might be interfering with the client's growth.
That makes total sense. Talking about being subjective, what about when you're first starting and you're so excited about taking patients? Is there a time when you can be too excited?
I think it's fine to feel excited. I think there's a time when that excitement can lead you to make some mistakes. I think that in the beginning, that excitement can lead people to schedule sessions whenever people want a session and take anybody on who wants to be taken on and commit to a regular schedule before you really need to commit to a regular schedule. And
I know you have ideas about the pacing in the beginning.
People have had their whole life without you before they call. And in their whole life, this is probably not the very first time they ever thought that they could use some help. And there are parts of their personality that prevent them from getting the help that they need. And those parts are very real and need to be respected. If you're too enthusiastic and you go along with their enthusiasm in the beginning too much, then what happens is you run the risk of bulldozing down those walls. And if someone has lived behind the wall their whole life, if all of a sudden that wall isn't there without them having time to get used to the idea that that wall is not going to be there, you know what they're going to do?
Run.
Or build another wall.
Oh.
They're going to either run or build another wall. And
I guess that's what I would do.
So people really need the time to acclimate to the idea of change, in my experience. And there's a number of things that you can do in terms of how you set up the initial consultations and coaching sessions and financial contract to have people get acclimated and ensure a greater possibility of success. So besides people possibly losing their walls too quickly, you know, suppose a physical analogy, you might have a running coach or someone like that who was so enthusiastic with you that they helped you run up a mountain when you hadn't run up before, but you don't know how to get down. And your legs aren't strong enough to get down, and you're going to suffer because you were just pushed too hard. And the other problem that can happen is that because life coaches tend to be very compassionate people who attach to others fairly quickly, that the client might correspondingly get very attached before it's clear that you can help them. And then it becomes a problem to facilitate their growth, and it becomes a problem to help them to work with somebody else, or
if they need somebody else.
Yeah. What you want to do is you want to avoid making yourself too available up front. And this sometimes is perceived controversially, or some people say this is dishonest. And I can understand why they might say that, although I respectfully disagree. Because I think that it's in the client's best interest and it's in your best interest that you not make yourself too available as you're starting out, because it's kind of like not making yourself too available in the beginning of a romantic relationship. Like if you ran out and slept with someone before you really knew what the relationship was going to be like, then that person would wonder, did they just want to sleep with me? Is there more of a relationship here? What am I really going to get out of this? Do I have to get away? You know, is there something perverse going on here? And those things go through your client's mind, whether you think they do or not, or whether they say them or they don't.
They wonder whether or not you slept with your clients?
Well, they might wonder whether you slept with your clients, because a lot of people do that. And
it comes on too, I know we're exaggerating here, but like if it's too intense, that you don't have limits.
Yeah, the word that you don't have limits. Who's regularly available to you in your life? Who's available to you every Sunday night? Who's available to you every Tuesday morning?
My dog.
Your dog? Who else?
Well, not too many people, really, because even with husbands and wives, they're not always there because they have other things in their lives. I mean, that's the closest would be a husband or a wife, or, you know, a mother to a child.
Right, exactly. Right.
But other than that, other than your dog, not too many people.
And your dog is always available. It's exactly what you're saying, though. The only relationships that people have experienced where people are available to them on a regular basis every week at the same time is, you know, a mother to a child, sometimes husbands and wives, sometimes bosses or co-workers, people that they have very strong feelings about, both positive and negative. And what happens is if you set up a regular appointment early on, you haven't the opportunity to learn about the person in the absence of those very strong feelings. And those very strong feelings will cloud your ability to assess what's blocking the person from getting where they want to go, what's preventing them from moving forward. The most difficult part of being a life coach is that you wind up trying to be an objective observer when you can't escape the fact that you're intensely part of a personal relationship.
Right.
So there's a way to say that in psychology that says you become the object of the transference as well as the interpreter of the transference. Transference just means, you know, some people will generally perceive you when they don't know much about you according to their earlier perceptions of people like you. And those habitual ways of perceiving the world can be one of the things that interferes with them accomplishing their goals. And it can be a very deep thing that interferes with them accomplishing their goals. And as a life coach, I'm not telling you to analyze that, but I'm telling you that that phenomenon will interfere with your ability to see what's really going on with the person.
So, for example, if somebody had trouble with their older sister, and their older sister used to beat them up. At some point, when I'm coaching someone, if they perceive me like their older sister in some way, they're going to be afraid I'm going to beat them up.
Right.
Even though I might be saying something in their best interest, if it's a little bit hard for them to do, they might hear that as abuse.
Right, and so what you want to do with that person before you get to the point that they have those strong feelings about you is that you understand enough about their life and how they respond to other people that are trying to give them constructive confrontation, so that you will know how to avoid stepping on that button if you want to constructively confront them about something.
Right.
Right? If you put them in a session every Tuesday night at 7 o'clock right away, then what will happen is even the act of asking about those other people, about those other experiences, will bring back those feelings in the moment. And those feelings will interfere with you learning how to communicate to the person in the way that works for them. And every client needs to be talked to differently. Every person. The only formula I have is to tell you that every person really needs very careful study and attention and loving connection. The reason you don't want to set up a regular relationship quickly is because usually things that are set up quickly are more likely to end quickly, because the intensity of the feelings that are brought into the relationship can cloud your ability to assess what they're really trying to accomplish and why they haven't done it so far, to figure out how you're going to help them. And because if you're too available too quickly, they're not going to value the time. It's going to make it harder for you to charge more. It's going to make it harder for them to work hard, cooperate with you, to take requests and suggestions. It's going to interfere.
They're going to take you for granted.
They're going to take you for granted, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. You know, what I recommend that people do when somebody calls is to spend 15 or 20 minutes on the phone with them. So you shouldn't call them back if you don't have 15 or 20 minutes to spend on the phone with them. And find out where they're calling, what they're trying to accomplish, you know, why now at this particular point in their life, what stopped them, what have they tried before, and just kind of get a sense of what's going on with them. And you'll do that in more detail when they actually come in for the appointment. There's two purposes to that elongated initial conversation. One is so that the client can get a chance to bond with you and get over their initial fears and have a chance to voice any concerns they have about coaching. The other purpose is for you to evaluate whether or not you want to work with them. And I think it's very important that coaches choose the clients that they feel that they can help, that they feel inspired to work with, that they're going to look forward to the phone ringing, because these people become a very integral part of your life. And if you work with people for any length of time, it's kind of hard to get rid of them. And one client can often ruin your practice because you're going to be sitting there and looking at your appointment on Friday and thinking, oh no, I've got to talk to Mary on Friday, or got to talk to Harry on Friday, or whatever it is. And you don't want that. You don't want that. You'll have negative feelings about your clients because you'll have all kinds of feelings about all kinds of people, and you're not a normal person if you don't. But
if it's predominantly a negative one, it's probably not a good idea to be working with that
especially
person.
In the beginning, especially before you have a lot of experience, yeah.
Because in the beginning of any relationship, when it's going to be a decent one, there's kind of an infatuation period. Now, I don't mean like you're falling in love with them, but it's like making a new friend, or it's either you hit it off or you don't. And it might be just in the middle. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, I've had clients who I feel kind of like, bleh, you know, not excited, not hating them, but not excited. And they go okay, but the ones that really go well are where I feel excited about that person.
Some coaches who have a more assertive personality and work very well with angry clients. Some of them will get excited when somebody is right out there with their anger. And I think that no matter what, as a coach, you need to acclimate yourself to people being angry at you at times. Because another thing that they don't get in their life is somebody who continues to listen to them even though they're expressing their anger at them. So I wouldn't mean to be Pollyannish about this and think that you're only going to get people that love you.
Right.
But you need to know, is it the kind of person that I can help? Is it the kind of person that I want to help? Do I want to work with them? Do I want to spend my time with people like this? Because when you do a good job, they're going to refer other people, and guess what kind of people they're going to refer?
Like themselves.
Yeah.
Right.
One of the reasons that I became so intrigued with marketing so early in my life was because, I grew up in a family of 17 psychologists, which is now 20 psychologists, and I saw that most of them were struggling to get enough patients. And it seemed like you shouldn't have to do that. It seemed like you should be able to match yourself with the people you're most likely to help and have an enjoyable day doing it. And I feel that I've succeeded. If you follow my system, you should have a strong pipeline. A strong pipeline which will make it easier for you to choose the people you want to work with.
I love it. What's next?
Well, I think another mistake that people make is either not having the structure that they're thinking about, or when they're coaching, or having too many of them in mind at the same time.
What do you mean by structure?
I mean, what are you trying to accomplish in the session?
Mm-hmm.
What are you trying to do as a coach? Coaching, psychotherapy, it's one of those things that everybody feels that they could do because I talk to people.
Right.
People ask me for advice.
Right.
I'm the one people come to, and all of my friends, when something's bothering them. I've accomplished a lot with my life. I can teach other people how to do it, and it's different. It's not like when your friends come to you for advice.
How's it different?
Well, it's harder. It's harder because you place yourself in a position that says, in some ways, I want to be the second or third most important person in your life. Like if the person is married, you don't want to be more important than their spouse. But if the person is really if you're going to really have a facilitative, life-changing impact on that person, you're going to have to be very important to them. And you're charging for your time. And you're focusing on them the way that no one else focuses on them. So the intensity of the things that they talk about and the feelings that are, in the room, so to speak, I'm using room metaphorically, but it's on the phone. Mm-hmm. The feelings that are between you are more intense than when you're talking to your friends and your loved ones the way that you're accustomed to. It's more focused, and there's more of a promise inherent in it. Even though, people will sign something that says you can't guarantee any particular results, and everybody kind of comes into it with the attitude that they know it's a cooperative venture and all that. But the bottom line is, hey, I'm paying you, I'm taking my time because I want to accomplish these goals. Where are the goods? You have to be willing to rise to that challenge. And it is a challenge. Life coaching and psychotherapy, they're hard. They're hard because people are creatures of habit, and they're not accomplishing what they want to accomplish in their life because of those habits, and you have to interrupt those patterns and
invite them to change.
And people are frightened of change, and they don't recognize that they're a secondary gain. If you think in terms of carrots and sticks, like in behavioral psychology, you think about what's reinforcing the behaviors that are keeping them stuck. Even though they feel very uncomfortable where they are and they want to move forward, there's also a lot of factors in their life that keep them comfortable where they are. And
those secondary gains.
Yeah, so you've got to go up against that in order to move them forward. I think that people need to pick a structure. We need to pick a coaching model and study. Before I give you a very, very rough draft of the coaching model that I use after all these years, I want to say that in the end, if you talk to 5 or 10 very successful life coaches and they're very experienced, you'll probably find that they're doing much of the same things.
Okay.
But the route that they took to get there was different. There was different language that they were taught with, different paradigms that they were taught to look for. And what they all have in common is that they all chose one and passionately followed it until they got to something that really worked for them. And the most important thing about a coaching model that you pick is that it makes sense to you, that it's something you can fall back on when you're confused about what's happening, and that you're not overly rigid about sticking to the model. Sharon, you always tell me that when your clients write a discussion guide that it drives you crazy if one of the clients wants you to go point by point through the discussion guide and ask every single question.
Right, because that's not natural.
But what it is it's something that ensures that there will be value that comes out of that interview because you've got a series of valuable questions.
I have a
right?
structure.
You've got a structure, right.
Right.
And you fall back on that when you're lost in the conversation.
Exactly.
When you're not sure what's going on.
That's right.
Okay. You've probably heard me talk about the basics of my structure throughout the conversation we've been having, and it's fairly simple. I'm very goal-oriented. I'm a very goal-oriented person. So a goal-oriented structure really appeals to me. And I like to tune in very closely to what people want to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
And get them to delineate that as specifically as possible. And then I want to know, well, why haven't they accomplished that so far? What's in their way? And there are ways of getting at that, in particular, during the initial consultations. And I call them consultations initially rather than coaching sessions to convey that we're going through a trial and setup period to make sure that we can work together well. And during the initial consultations, I want to know what's bringing people in.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll ask people questions about what's bringing people in until it's clear to me what they're trying to accomplish or, where they're trying to go. And then I assume that the desire to contact a coach and the fact that they actually did it is a constructive force in their life. So I'm very interested in understanding the constructive forces in their life so that I'll know how to leverage them later on to help them accomplish what they want to accomplish. You're definitely going to need these because they're going to get stuck. Then I want to know what their thoughts and feelings are about coaches and coaching in general. Have they ever been to a coach before? Have they ever been to a psychotherapist before? What was their experience? Do they have friends that have been? What have they read about it?
Mm-hmm. Because
that will tell you how they are perceiving the relationship.
What their expectations are.
Yes, what their expectations are, and I'll tell you when you're likely to violate their expectations. And you, in particular, want to know if they did work with someone else, when they stopped and why did they stop, and what could have gone better.
What happened, right?
Yeah, what could have been better. So that's all in the vein of what they want to accomplish and what their life has been like so far trying to accomplish that.
And isn't there research that shows that when people go to help and have their expectations delivered, they're more likely to perceive it as having had value versus if they go to help, the person working with them has a different way of being than what their expectations were, they perceive it as not helping?
Well, in all of the psychotherapy research, the major factor that predicts satisfactory outcome on the part of the client is the client's perception of the empathy in the psychotherapist.
Interesting.
And by the way, just as an aside, since we're talking about that research, another very interesting finding in that research was that a very large number of people go to one session, and before they did this research, they go to one session and they never come back. And before they did this research, psychotherapists used to assume that the reason was the client wasn't satisfied or they were scared of something or something like that. But when they actually asked the clients, what they said was, well, I got exactly what I was looking for.
Aha.
In the vast majority of cases. So you will have...
they were cured in one session.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yes, so there's two implications of that. One is that will happen to you. It'll happen to you a lot, actually, in the beginning. And you might have people that come in for one session and then come back 2 years later. They held on to your number. They kept reading your newsletter. They came back 2 years later. There'll be a large number of people that you positively impact in that initial appointment. And that'll be it. And people can change their life in one appointment. They can. Because of what it takes for them to get to the point that they're willing to have the appointment, that they were really ready to change, and you can be the catalyst to facilitate that. If you want to facilitate maximum positive change, and you want the opportunity to work with them and develop a practice, then the other implication of that research is that you will need to, after carefully studying what they present to you, you'll need to convince them in that first appointment that you can help them accomplish their goals. If you think that you can. If you think that you can. Well, we'll talk about how to do that when I finish the structure. In addition to, what do they want to accomplish and why now, and who do they work with in the past, and, what in particular prompted their desire in their life that particular week or day or whenever they called, and, the people that they live with and work with, what are their attitudes towards coaching, and you want to know what you're up against. What else have they tried to accomplish their goals? What helped? What hindered? What's their perception of why they haven't accomplished it so far? There's a fairly famous question called the miracle question. Have you heard about that?
No.
Okay, suppose we were to work together, and one day you just woke up, and everything was exactly the way you wanted it to be. What would it look like? What would that day be? And that helps people to dimensionalize their goals.
Oh, I want you to ask me that later.
I definitely will.
Okay.
It's a wonderful way to become more goal-oriented, is to ask the miracle question. And I think that's very useful to ask in the initial appointments for the client, because they'll get an immediate impact out of that. If no one's asked them that before, they'll have an immediate impact because it will bring their goal to life in a way that hasn't been brought to life, and they'll be inspired, and also it will paint a picture in your mind, and that's one of the things I like to take notes about in particular, of where this person wants to go and how you're going to be perceived as successful. Then you want to understand other similar goals that they've struggled with, which have they been able to overcome, which haven't they been able to overcome. You want to know who the most constructive people are in their lives, with particular respect to these goals. You can ask it more generally also.
I love that.
Because this is a very goal-oriented approach, I really want to know, in particular respect to these goals, who's most constructive and who gets in the way of accomplishing these goals. And then I want to know about their idols and icons, people that they think have accomplished these goals. And that could be someone in their personal life, it could be a celebrity, it could be somebody from their past, but I want to know these icons, and then I want them to dimensionalize those icons. And what ideas they've had themselves in the course of this initial consultation, what ideas they've had about facilitating growth towards these goals. And generally, after people have had an opportunity to talk about this in a focused way, they're going to have some ideas.
I can see why people want to work with you. It makes me want to have you as my coach, even though you're my husband. I'm not kidding.
You're the one exception, Rick. I would definitely coach you if you wanted.
Thanks.
Actually, I don't think you can do that.
I know.
I don't think you can do that.
But that was very sweet of you to offer.
Well, why wouldn't somebody want to work with you if your whole focus was on what they wanted to accomplish and what was holding them back?
Right.
Your whole focus is on what they want, and you're carefully tuned into that. Why wouldn't they want to work with you?
Exactly.
Then I explained to them towards the end of the first appointment that what we're going to be doing, and the way that I work, is to ask people if there's anything particular on their mind when they came in, remind them of the goals that they wanted to accomplish, ask them to tell me about some of their experiences of the week that might relate to those goals. Maybe one experience where they felt that they moved closer, and one place where they became pessimistic about it, like they were caught away. And then I continue to dig. Now, some people draw the distinction between psychotherapy and coaching in terms of whether or not you ask about the past. I think the reason that they do that is that, first of all, the past can be very painful to talk about, and people can wallow in the past. If you're asking about the past in the context of specific goals that people want to accomplish.
And what might have worked or what got in the way.
Yes. This is not for the purpose of, figuring out that you wanted to marry your mother and kill your father or something like that, like might be in classical analysis. This is for the purpose of drawing parallels between what's holding you back now and what held you back then. It's one of the more important things that people can talk about, in my opinion. And I have seen people have more breakthroughs when they have an interest and willingness to not so much delve into the past, but to go back and forth drawing analogies to their current struggles.
With their history.
So it's an observation and a problem-solving process that relates their historical learnings and historical struggles to their contemporary life.
You know, there's a really interesting technique from neuro-linguistic programming. They have a whole bunch of interesting tools to help people grow. But one that you're reminding me of right now is people have some discomfort about having people go into their history, is to have them view it as if they're watching a video rather than being in the moment. And that takes away the fear.
It's a wonderful technique. It's a really wonderful technique. That's not the only thing that's going to help them to observe patterns and think new thoughts and have new feelings and try new things. You can ask people to talk about a movie or their favorite TV show. And if you're grounded in what their goals are and what typically holds them back, then as they're talking about a movie or a TV show, you will see analogies. And you can ask them to talk more about the different characters and what they meant to them and who would they like to be more like and who would they like to let go of, and who demonstrates traits that they would like to let go of, and they can certainly talk about their contemporary life. I find that if you want people's heart and soul in the work that you do, that eventually you want to also help them talk about their finances and their nighttime dreams at some point. And you're not going to analyze, as a life coach, you're not going to analyze a dream the way that you might analyze a dream as a trained psychologist, although you might, because maybe you have experience with that. But there are new thoughts in dreams. I like to tell people that thinking is planning for doing, and dreams are planning for thinking. And when you can get people to talk about dreams, even if you don't make any interpretation, and most frequently, actually, if you don't make an interpretation, but you can just get people to keep talking about it, even though they'll be begging you for an interpretation, you'll find that they have new thoughts. I could spend 6 hours talking about dreams because I wrote my dissertation on dreams.
But I think the most important thing about a dream is how the dreamer interprets to himself. And so just to get them to think about it and to say what it might have meant or what application it might have to this current issue probably gets a lot more than just spoon-feeding a response to them, because if a person's not ready for your response anyway, they're not going to hear it. So the best thing is what they think of it. And
absolutely. Here's the thing about dreams. If someone chooses to tell you a dream, then they're choosing to communicate with you symbolically, right?
Yes.
Why would someone choose to communicate with you symbolically rather than communicating with you directly?
Something uncomfortable.
Yeah. It's a wall. It's an opportunity to examine the wall. And this goes back to the philosophy of not being a bulldozer with people's walls.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would prefer to do with people's walls is support them and look at them with them. And what I find is that when I do that, people start to have the courage to peek around them. And dreams in particular are like that. If you bulldoze through a dream and you see exactly what it means and you tell them, wrong.
It's like an invasion.
It's kind of invasion. They feel like you're x-raying their soul, and they come to have magical expectations of you.
Even worse.
Yeah. That's, in my personal way of working with dreams and understanding them. I think there are Jungian specialists who would say otherwise, are very effective with people otherwise. Can we go into the next?
Yes.
So the bottom line for the structure that I teach is goal orientation and examining the reluctance that people have to accomplish their goals and what gets in the way, and the people and things that get in the way, and dimensionalizing all of that and just ongoingly exploring that. And I find that if you do that and you support their walls and you examine them with them, that people consistently move forward. Every 3, 4, 5 months, they look back and they're doing things in their life that they aren't doing it. Thanks very much for your time and attention. If you'd like to find out more about taking your coaching to the next level, getting certified, and building the practice of your dreams, please visit becomearealcoach.com. 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 Thank you.